meeting to order. Bill, do we have minutes to review? Oh, we're good. Yeah, I don't think so. Okay. Turn it over to you, Superintendent.
Okay. All right. Good evening to EXCOM members, and I'll do my best to see if we can catch ourselves back up on time, hitting the highlights, and get us back on track here. Just want to go over some of the things that you all will hear on the agenda coming from the team, most of which is posted in the on-board as the read-ahead materials. And there'll be various different discussions. And there's a couple of discussions that I'd like to tee up here for discussion among the EXCOM with the possibility of alerting you that at the May board meeting, those are when either decisions are going to be announced or presentations will be made to the board to gain a decision. And I'll talk about those things. Those are centered around a number of things, athletics, centered around athletics, and obviously the discussion about what we will do with tuition fees and our recommendations to the board. So that's what we're going to cover today. I'll talk a little bit about a number of things. Number one, just kind of a preview of the items. There are a couple of programs related to athletics that I wanted to talk about. The first is the House settlement that is still pending final decision coming from the judge who's presiding over that. And then what's being worked and called the fifth quarter program, which is a program that would allow not only our student athletes, but allow any cadet to stay at the Institute a 9th or 10th semester and continue studies if they wanted to, if they had a gap between going into the military, if they had to stay because they had not fulfilled the requirements for graduation, so on and so forth. And so we'll talk about those things. So just real highlights that you'll see tomorrow during the brief. Number one, I'll hit some of the things that happened on post over the last semester. If you recall, I showed you, you had a pretty packed schedule over the semester, a lot of activities going on, and we've executed all of those events. We held the AMCAS conference that was here, which is the American Military Colleges and Universities, I believe it is. We hosted them. They meet twice a year. It's all the senior military colleges. It's all the military schools like New Mexico Military Academy, those types of schools. And so we hosted them here this year for the first time in a good while. And then we had a number of distinguished speakers that came in close. We had an honor winner, Captain Flo Globerg, who came and spoke to the entire Corps. And then just last evening, we had a Nobel Peace Prize laureate from Ukraine, Alexandra Matvisha. And she spoke to primarily international studies students about some of the actions that she's been doing that led her to get that Peace Prize laureate. It was very well attended. She gave some great remarks, powerful remarks about the strength of the effort on the part of Ukraine and the need for the international community to continue support. So that was another thing. Founders Day, obviously, I'll hit the highlights about Founders Day. Well attended, great event. Allowed us to do the rollout of the strategic plan for the 21st century leaders. The annual event of Ring Figure and what that all meant and how well that was received by the Corps. It's the second year we've done it down in Cop Hall, which kind of goes back to a time when we did it for a while. We were doing it here over in Marshall Hall. And I think the hope is that once we get Moody Hall up and running and built, that we could do it there because it would accommodate a much larger audience, would be a newer space. But that was obviously an event. Then we had the December commissioning and the commencement, where we had Pat Work, Major General 82nd Airborne Division Commander. He came and did the commencement ceremony while the PMS for Army Department did the commission ceremony because we had a small number of commissions this year. Inclusive Excellence Training. For this year, we had a speaker that Brianna and the team were able to purely talk about neurodiversity in the workplace, which was pretty fascinating presentation. This speaker, who is an author, he's on the spectrum, if you will. He talked about how his experiences and how other people's experiences with having to live through these neurodiverse challenges and situations, but still great contributing members to the workforce. So that was the focus of this inclusive excellence training for faculty and staff for the year. We've talked a number of times about the Ranger Challenge team that went to the Welsh Cambrian Patrol competition and finished with the bronze, and I'll give a highlight of that. We had some recognition that came to our faculty and staff. Dr. Maddie Smith was appointed a Virginia Poet Laureate. Chief Mike Marshall received a recognition for a leadership award from the state. We've had a couple of visits. Jim Squire in our electrical engineering department is set to receive the Chev Outstanding Faculty Award in March, which is another recognition. So good things continue to happen in how our faculty and staff are performing. And then we had two visits by distinguished visitors. Governor Youngkin came to post. When was he here for?
December 12th.
Yeah, okay. Back in December, and that was a great day because a lot of the Corps who are the wayward kids, they got amnesty. And then Speaker Don Scott was here last Saturday, a week ago. He was here. We've been trying to get him on post since last year. We got him to commit here in the fall as the legislature was about to kick into gear. And so we were able to get him on post where he got to see VMI firsthand. He's a Texas A&M grad, so it was a good event. And then we continue to have cadets doing some standout things, and I'll talk a little bit about one of the basketball players, which is a great story. Ricky Bradley Jr., a young man who came here as a rat and transferred and came back. He was highlighted on a blog called Fan Word. Talks about his experience, why he came back, what he sees as the value of being back here at VMI, his desire to connect better with alumni mentors, which is something that he felt like as a rat, he didn't know what to do. So I think that's a good news story for us. And then I'll show the calendar for the springtime, and as we head into spring, we'll talk a little bit about just kind of some of the events that are going on. We'll be hosting several conference championships here on post. For the second year, we'll be swimming and diving for America East, and then the SoCon track and field championships indoor, where last year our men finished second for the first time since like 2015, 2016, and our women finished fourth, and then the men subsequently finished second in the outdoor track season as well. We're going to host the Chev meeting. So General Jumper is the chair of the Chev board, and so we're going to host them. We've already had the Philippine Military Academy visit. We've got a number of military academies that are interested in sending students to the institute. So that's another thing that speaks well because it will give us an opportunity to increase our international presence, and then reciprocally we'll consider the ability to send more cadets to do study abroad, which I think is a good thing. We'll have a number of reunions punctuated by the class of '85 reunion, and then we'll have a cyber research conference that's going to take place, and then we will go into the year-end events, which are Memorial Day Parade, Change of Command, and then commissioning and commencement. So this year, we're sequencing them in such a way where it'll demonstrate an orderly transition of leadership. transition of leadership from first class to rising first class or second class will occur after the Memorial Day parade events. So we're going to do that. I will talk a little bit about the presidential inauguration, the fact that unfortunately the Corps did not march in it. We were anticipating and expecting to have upwards of over 1,300, I believe, 1,300, 1,350 cadets out of the Corps marching in the parade. We ended up having to flex since we would have been the largest contingent. I think it was somewhere around 7,000, 7,500 total participants in the parade. We would have been the largest contingent, obviously, with a group that size. When they shifted into the Verizon Center, there was no way we were going to be able to get a Corps that size into the Verizon Center to march around. So what we did was we had a sunk cost for buses and all those things, so we ended up just flexing to use some of those buses and send the cadets, since classes were already canceled and so on and so forth. We sent the cadets, and it was a national holiday as well, we sent cadets some down to Charlotte to take in a basketball game. We sent some to Richmond, and then we sent some to an indoor water park, I believe. So cadets got a good deal out of it in recognition for all their hard work in preparation. Accreditation, I'll talk a little bit about that. Basically, we finished 2 accreditations this year, and by all accounts and purposes, we passed through those with flying colors. I've yet to see the report, but there are no deficiencies that I'm aware of that, and we came through accredited, re-accredited. So ABET for engineering and ACSP in economics and business. And then the work continues on with our SACS COC accreditation. Myself and the majority of the team went down to Austin for the SACS conference that they have. When you get into your accreditation window, there's a lot of discussion and a lot of tutoring and education that occurs to help get you prepared. And then they do some other things like announce the schools that have passed through accreditation for the year that they're in. So we're in the class of 27, which means our accreditation window starts next fall. So we'll get through that. And then the last thing I will do in my remarks is I will introduce our new chief of staff, who's sitting behind me, Colonel Travis Homiak, class of 95. Recently retired from the United States Marine Corps. Travis was our PMS down in the Navy Marine Corps detachment. He's been on board now since there's what?
2 weeks almost.
So he's excited to be here. Got a lot of stuff going on. He's already not dipping his toe in the water. He's at a full sprint, I would say. But it's good to have him on the team. And a lot of good things are happening already. Okay. A couple of things that I want to talk about with a little bit more detail. And so those will be my opening remarks. And then of course, you all will hear from the various different staff agencies. One of the discussions that we want to tee up for the entire board is going to be about this understanding relative to the decision that's going to take place in May about tuition increases. And so what I asked the team to do is put together a brief, and they're going to be a combined brief of sorts. Shannon's going to brief a part of it, and Dallas Clark is going to brief a part of it. So to help the board understand, number one, the affordability piece of what most of our cadet corps experiences in terms of how much the Institute, federal dollars and state dollars allow to ensure that the Institute, and coming to the Institute, is affordable. And then the second piece is going to be, Dallas is going to kind of lay out what, number one, the total revenue picture looks like for this upcoming year, and then the total expense picture, but we're going to kind of laze in on different options of what might happen if tuition is Dean will talk about academic performance from the previous semester and the relative performance of RATs, which we always pay attention to, and then the rest of the core. And then the commandant will talk about things as it relates to cadet life in barracks, discipline of the core, so on and so forth. Okay? And that will pretty much close out the opening day's discussions.
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
I attended the AAP board yesterday,
Okay.
and,
Alumni Association.
yeah. And there was a lot of discussion about the recent Cadet Club meeting and
Mhm.
discussion about NIL.
Yeah.
And then like where we are on NIL.
Right.
Can you give us like,
Yep.
just like, well,
Sure.
where are we and what are
Sure.
you seeing and what?
Sure. So there's a couple topics I wanna talk about to include the NIL piece. And what I'd like to do is number one, talk about the task force work that was done, with the group of folks from the athletic department and the Cadet Club, to look at our athletic department, and the sports teams that we have, and then come up with a set of recommendations. So they came up with, this group met over last summer, and Jamal's gonna talk about this in detail during the committee, but we met last summer. They had a number of meetings that they went through. This was prior to Jamal's arrival. But what I wanted Jim to do was, leave a little room for Jamal to come in and kind of get his fingers into it, since he was gonna be the new AD going forward. And they came up with about 25 recommendations, I believe it was. Roughly about 8 of those recommendations, I've already given Jamal the go-ahead to start working. Some of them we're working to implement now, okay, for the start of the next academic year. Some of them are gonna require just a little bit more work to flesh out. Some of them will more than likely require us coming to the board and making sure that the board approves some of those recommendations. So Jamal's gonna go into the details about that. But for example, one is about a nutritionist, whether or not we ought to have a nutritionist here as part of the institute, to help our student athletes and perhaps the entire core understand, the role that nutrition plays in their physical fitness, their mental fitness, and how we can ensure that over the course of their cadetship, student athletes are doing what they need to improve physically as a student athlete. The other part of it is looking at whether or not this would be useful to the core with all the physical activity that takes place among the core cadets. So that's just an example of one of the recommendations that we made. But Jamal's gonna talk about that.
Maybe this isn't the right setting, but I'm horribly ill-informed on NIL. I just find it
Yeah.
incredibly complex.
Yeah.
Do you have a sense of where we are relative to the rest of the Southern Conference? Do
Yeah.
people, like,
Yeah.
where do you see it going?
So, another topic Jamal's gonna talk about will be the specifics of NIL. And so, right now, when the college presidents met, okay, we discussed among ourselves, various different options and opportunities that each college would consider, as part of NIL, and it's built around this house settlement, right? So, right now, you can have what's called out-of-institute NIL agreements, right? Initially, it was individuals, student to student. If a student could monetize themselves, right, they could sign an NIL contract. Right?
With like an advertiser?
With an advertiser, with a donor might say, hey, look, I'm gonna pay you, right, to do something, with respect to my business, whatever the case may be, to monetize yourself, right? But the NIL would allow you to have that arrangement directly to them, no involvement with the institute. Okay, so that's the out-of-house piece. Okay, what the college presidents within SoCon agreed was that we would pause on the in-house piece, right? Pending the results of the House settlement, right? So, right now, based on some numbers that I've been given from Jamal, there are a number of colleges in the SoCon that have out-of-house NIL arrangements, okay? To my knowledge, nobody has an in-house ring. Now, because of state law, the new state law that came out last year, that allowed schools in Virginia by state law to establish in-house NIL arrangements, we could pursue an NIL arrangement.
And that's what would come to us.
Correct.
That's what the board would have to come to them for.
Correct.
Okay.
This is very real time though, right? Because now we're starting to deal with retention of existing athletes, and so we're,
It is extremely
my
real
sense is
time.
it's very real time. That's why,
But the reason I'm asking is, I heard in the meeting that our basketball team is getting
Out-of-house NIL.
out-of-house NIL.
Out-of-house NIL. There was an NIL, and again, we're not involved in it. There was an out-of-house consortium that was created. And there are some alumni who, recognizing kind of how fast this thing is moving, they went and got involved in this consortium, where they are some cadet athletes, basketball players. There's an agreement on them getting paid sums of money. Now, there's two other features that are separate from the NIL. There's an academic achievement fund, which we did do, okay? And the academic achievement fund is set up in such a way where if you stay at VMI and you perform academically at a certain level, right, then you would get a sum of money. And I'm pretty sure academic achievement was upon graduation. There's a second one that's called the Alston Fund, which operates similarly, okay? And I know that one is upon graduation, you would get the equivalent of, I believe, $5,000 a year, right, for 4 years. So you graduate in 4 years, the Alston Fund would get you somewhere about $20,000. Okay, so you have those two arrangements as well, which we are participating in. Right now, it largely affects only basketball. It largely only affects basketball.
with the in-house, when is the Southern Conference going to sort of reach a conclusion?
So, when this House settlement agreement is done, right, then we have by March 1st, which we aren't real clear on whether the House settlement agreement is going to be done by then, but the NCAA has put a deadline on colleges and universities to make a determination on whether or not you're going to opt out or opt in to the results of the House settlement agreement, right? And that essentially means one feature of the opting in is that you can establish an in-house NIL consortium. Okay, you can do that, but then subject to that, you would agree to a revenue sharing arrangement between the institution and student athletes. Okay, and then the second part to that would be you would have to operate under certain roster limits. Okay, for the most part, there are some teams that would grow in small numbers. So really, it's the smaller teams would grow in roster limit sizes. A bigger team like football actually gets a reduction in the roster limits, and you'd have to operate on that. You don't have to opt in, right? And I think you have, over the window in which this settlement is going to be paid, you have that window to make the decision on whether you're going to opt in or remain opting out. Okay? Now, there's a revenue sharing piece along with that as well. So we get a revenue share from the NCAA, all schools do, as a part of the revenues that go to the NCAA. I believe if you don't opt in, right, then you'll lose that as an opportunity, right? So Jamal has talked to me about some initial thoughts that he had about it. What we want to do is we want to kind of put together a set of options and want to educate folks on it. So part of the briefing that Jamal gave and Danny Rocco gave, and I asked Jamal to talk about some of this tomorrow with likelihood that we would have Danny brief in May. full board or to the athletic committee. Part of this would allow us to understand kind of what this NIL landscape is all about. Oftentimes what you hear about the NIL is all the stuff that just doesn't sound appealing, like you're paying some student athlete millions of dollars, right, to come to school and just play a sport. With that money, student athletes are, going out and buying fancy cars. They're not going to classes, so on and so forth. The real power of this whole NIL and how it's being shaped is a couple ways, especially if you do it in-house. The institution can set up the framework under which this agreement is going to be. It's essentially a work contract.
Is it either or? Is it like if you do in-house, you can't have the out-house?
Yeah, you got to do.
You choose one or the other.
You have to choose one or the other. But
Okay.
you have, as I understood it, you have roughly 10 years to make that decision, right? So right now, we're thinking that in all likelihood, you wouldn't opt in this first year, right? To just kind of get a better understanding. Jamal wants to bring in some legal folks, a law firm, and some people who specialize in sport practices, and help us understand the different ways that this could operate.
So for right now, we have a out-house.
We haven't opted in or opted out yet.
Well, right now, we have an out-house.
An out-of-house.
That's tax, sorry. We have an out-of-house program right now. I mean, we don't have it.
Yes, correct.
Right, I just want to make sure I understand, because I was surprised to hear.
So we don't have that, but you mentioned it would be completely separate from VMI, if it's the out-of-house. But
It's the out-of-house.
at what point does knowledge about what those arrangements are bring any liability for the institute?
Yeah.
If obviously students can be taken advantage of,
Sure.
bad things can happen, and I'm just wondering about that legal exposure, if you know a little but not enough, right?
I'm not an expert, but what I'm understanding right now is because it is an out-of-house arrangement, that there is no legal exposure for the institution. The contract between what sums of money that an individual might be paid, right, is solely between that individual and that consortium, from what I understand.
Do you know if there's a disclosure, like do they have to disclose to the institute or to their university that they have these arrangements, or, and you may not know,
I don't know. I've only recently become aware of the one that we had, because obviously there's some BMI alum involved. The one that we had was actually initiated by our basketball coach, Ruff.
Yeah, if I could just interject for a minute. Good discussion, but we've got our priorities wrong. We need executive committee and athletics committee and the board. There's a dozen slides on NIL in the athletics committee handout. We're spending almost no time talking about the budget problem with athletics, the long-term budget problem that we've got. It has been identified, we've talked about it being addressed. I can't see any evidence that it's being addressed. There's nothing really in the board book about it. Jenna and I talked about it a couple of days ago. What about a plan for our athletics? A comprehensive plan for improving our competitiveness and fixing the budget. We're getting bits and pieces of the task force recommendation. We're getting a few of the recommendations. We've never seen the report. We've never seen the presentation on it. It's fine to talk about how we're going to pay the players, but we ought to talk about how we're going to pay the coaches. We ought to talk about our budget, fixing the budget, and we ought to talk about how we're gonna, what is the overall plan for athletics? It's broken, and we're spending all our time talking about NIL.
Well, I would tell you, Teddy, that number one, this NIL thing, it seems to be moving at a very rapid pace. Okay? We have talked about the athletic budget, and we forecasted where in 27, I believe, the numbers that would generate revenue based on increased floor size, getting our hands better around the cost drivers that are affecting the athletic budget, would bring us back into a more narrow range between the subsidized portion of the athletic budget that has historically been paid by the institute. Okay? The number that we have routinely talked about was we were approaching $1 million, and we've shown in the forecast that once we hit our core size, class of 26 out of barracks, our core size will return back to roughly 1,700 plus, and then the revenue picture for the institute will improve. We also have talked about a set of directions that I gave the athletic department on fiscal management of the athletic budget. So we have had those conversations. Jamal is going to come in, and he's going to talk about the recommendations that he has, because it has been asked about from the board. And so we'll do that here in this upcoming meeting. And I'm hoping that we'll front load that so you all will have a better understanding about it. The athletic NIL is a topic of interest because we have had for 3 years now in basketball, and we're now starting to see it in football, which a mass exodus of student athletes, right? And I don't want to overstate it by saying, but a large number. Now, we don't seem to be far off from kind of what the average numbers are of other colleges, right? But it affects us greatly. For example, football, right? They experience 2 transfer portals. I learned this through the briefing with Danny Rocco. They experience one at the end of the season, right? And then they experience another one in the spring season after spring football, right? Well, we don't have the ability to bring young people in. And so the coach is signaling this as something that is going to happen, that's going to result in the loss of a number of student athletes. We have had a number of student athletes who wanted to stay for a 5th year and finish their career as a VMI football player or a VMI athlete. And we've not been able to get them to commit to staying because they are looking at an opportunity elsewhere that might either afford them the start of a graduate program, the completion of a graduate program, those types of things. So that's why we're talking about this 5th quarter program. That's why we're talking about NIL. Jamal will certainly go through the budget impacts of what we're seeing and see if our forecasts that we briefed last year are still intact. We're again predicting, I think in 27, that things will be more aligned.
I don't recall us as a board agreeing that timetable was acceptable. The deficits over the next couple of years we certainly didn't agree to that.
Well, I mean, you agreed to the budget.
What budget? This year's budget.
The one we're executing now.
Right.
We agreed to the budget. We came in and we proposed in that budget projected the fee increase and we approved the budget, there wasn't a recognition that the budget you had was gonna require a subsidy to athletics.
I didn't say that, I said, I don't recall us, agreeing that it was acceptable in 26, and,
So next year's
even
budget.
in 27, the level that you're talking about.
Mhm.
It sounds like there's no other work going on, it's just assumed that those deficits are okay.
No,
Next
you know,
couple.
we can, when we update the budget here coming in May, we'll be able to show you the results of work related to going out and getting advertising, right? Increased ticket sales, increased ticket costs, those things that we said we could do internally, plus the fiscal controls that athletics has done over this past year, kind of what we look like. We'll certainly be able to highlight that for the committee and the board.
We'll talk about it more in the athletics committee, I'm sure.
Yep.
But I don't hear you saying we're gonna see the task force report.
No. I said Jamal will brief, the task force, the work of the task force.
On a few elements of it.
No. He's got a brief, I think it's in here. Do we have the task force brief? Bill? He's got the brief, it's like, I don't know, about 6 or 8 slides. I've seen it. And, his intent was to brief that along with these other topics.
Okay, it's not in the athletics committee materials, so.
Okay, all right. I'll close the loop with him and just double check.
Still, think we need to talk about an overall plan for
Yeah.
improving our athletics program, rather than just getting bits and pieces of
Yeah.
task force recommendations.
The other piece is that, while those were the recommendations, and there were a set that I, directed that we go ahead and move out on, Jamal is in the process of developing a plan, subordinate plan to the strategic plan, an operations plan, if you will, which is intended to lay out, the direction for athletics. And so there's a couple of issues, that, we're already moving out on, and I think it's smart to move out on, because we know that some of these things, are not working in our favor right now. But yeah, the intent is to develop that plan. We'll talk about that.
I think the task force piece is in the athletic program. It may not be enough depth, Teddy, for you, but there is a piece in there. It's about 6, 8 pages. I think I'm looking at it right now in the athletic piece actually. So it's
One last question, back to this NIL thing.
Sure.
When you say it's an out-of-house program, I assume it's not just the institute, that means the Cadet Club can't be involved in it either,
Correct. Right.
because it's affiliated or?
Right.
Okay.
The Cadet Club's right. In-house, that's where the discussions are.
Because if you did an in-house program, it would be in conjunction with them.
It would be in conjunction with that.
I guess what's one of the negatives to wait too long on bringing it in-house, right? It doesn't seem like it's under the umbrella of everything else we do, including board oversight.
Less controls.
Right.
There's a piece about for the individual donor, not tax deductible as an out-of-house arrangement, tax deductible, if it's in-house and it's worked through, an entity like the Cadet Club, which is specifically designed to raise funds for the institute.
Yeah. I just,
Number of those.
it may be, I understand from the meeting, you're hiring lawyers to do what you're talking about. I just wanna make sure we understand, because I was just surprised candidly to hear our basketball players are, they're making some money.
And again, it is outside the universe of normal and customary, which is why the uncertainty, that's what that discomfort
Yeah, but
comes from.
we talk a lot about,
Right.
you know, so I
So
wanna make sure we talk a little bit more about that. That's the part of it.
No, understood,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And go ahead, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Jamal will describe it in such a way where you where again, it's kind of taking away kind of the negative narrative about NIL, because a lot of what you hear on the news, when you hear about the Big 5 conferences, the Power 5 conferences. Okay? It doesn't apply to the majority of schools that will have NIL arrangements. There's a piece in there that we've been thinking about, if we're gonna do this, that would incorporate the opportunity for these young student athletes to learn about entrepreneurship, right? The young man, Ricky Bradley, he's monetized himself through a clothing line that he's developed on his own, which again is perfectly legal under his framework, and it's on this out-of-house thing. So Jamal will describe it as kind of pocket money, and then there's another arrangement which would result in the more substantial sums of money. But pocket money can be simply a student athlete saying, hey, you know, I'm gonna start a blog, right? I'm gonna start a podcast, right? And if he gets enough people who are interested in his podcast, then all of a sudden he starts to monetize him or herself.
I mean, I don't wanna get us off track, and I know we're already.
We are off track.
Yeah, so, but I just wanna make sure at some point we're talking about this.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because
And
it's,
maybe Jamal can
John.
talk tomorrow whether or not, if you ask a coach, would a coach say this is good or bad for the sport? Number one, just forget me running my business, but is it good or bad for the sport? I'm gonna guess most say it's bad for the sport.
Yeah.
On the other hand, we have to be competitive.
Yeah.
Is that how, I
Well-
don't mean to put words in people's mouths, but.
Yeah, so I for a long time, you know, being a former athlete, I'm like, this is bad. Right? But I would tell you that, you know, after thinking about it a little further, the first thing is, don't penalize the student athlete for the rules that have now changed, right? Don't frown upon the student athlete. This is the direction that intercollegiate athletics is going to go. And then understand that the coaches, both in terms of student athletes retention, right, and student athlete success, coaches are seeing that if you don't get your hands around this, right, if you don't get your hands around this, then you are either gonna be pushed into the den of mediocrity because everybody else is gonna be doing it, right? And you're gonna have this perpetual cycle of losses of students. Andrew, talking to our coach, Andrew Wilson, right, he's anticipating that there are a number of his students, because these guys can go out and they can hire agents, right? And the agents are, you know, I call them ambulance chasers, but they'll go, they solicit you and say, hey, I can get you X amount of dollars if you sign with me as an agent. Now it's perfectly legal. It used to be under the other NCAA rules. And so all these challenges create situations where at the end of the season, student athletes, primarily in some of these bigger revenue sports, are going to be looking at what options they have in order to monetize themselves.
no, I get it. We move on.
John,
Yeah.
before we do, just in the athletics committee book, there's 3 slides on the task force.
Okay?
One has a list of who's on it.
Okay?
The second one says there's 25 recommendations.
Okay?
Doesn't say what they are.
Okay?
The third page says, here's 7 of the recommendations that we want to pursue.
Okay?
That's it.
Okay?
So, I don't call that a presentation.
I'm always saying it was in here, but you may want more detail, and that's one of the things that, you know. puts
That's
that
what
in.
I'm saying, we're seeing
We
bits
take
and
it.
pieces.
Let's have Jamal.
Yeah.
Yeah, my question is, it was a task force for dealing with only the athletic recruiting component and retention, or was a task force also to address the budget issues?
It didn't address it. So the task force, was to deal with a range of issues, right? And so they looked at it, they made recommendations about whether or not we ought to reduce the number of Division I athletic sports that we have. That was something they looked at, right? They looked at coaches' retention, right? What would it take to improve coaches' retention? They looked at and they surveyed student athletes about the things that they felt that they needed more of, more support facilities that are here on post, and what impact those facilities might have on drawing talented student athletes and where certain investments ought to occur. So there's a number of things. What I will do is I'll get with them all and make sure he either has slides or he's prepared to talk to those things. Okay. But again, this was the prelude for the May discussion as it pertains to NIL, fifth quarter, and then we should know what's coming out of the House settlement. And so, for me, I just want to hear from the board in terms of what are your expectations, so that we can have the discussion here at the board meeting, and then in May, if there are set of decisions that need to be made, we make those decisions so that the team can work over the balance of the summer to get those things implemented, so that some of these things, if the board approves, we will kick off next academic year having those things implemented.
Right. Right. Good.
So,
Are we close? Oh, I don't want to cut you off.
So that's those areas. Are there any more questions about fifth quarter? And I would tell you that as it pertains to fifth quarter, the situation is this. So the NCAA changed its rules, right? It used to be a time, and our policies here at the Institute have said that in order to stay a 9th or 10th semester, you had to be enrolled in a full load of classes, okay? And you also had to have not fulfilled your academic requirements for graduation. So we have had student athletes, a lot of it occurred during COVID, where student athletes were getting additional years. And we also have had students that get redshirted, right, where they have a 5th year of eligibility to play a sport. We've had a number of students over the years that have intentionally not fulfilled their academic requirements in order to come back for that 9th semester, 5th year. Okay? So the rules for the NCAA have changed such that you can come back for a 9th semester or a 5th year, and you are not required by the NCAA to take a full load of classes. Right? So there's a misalignment there. There's a misalignment there with our old policies.
I think, did Bareshi brief us on this last?
He probably did.
I think he did.
And so, but there's a piece of it that pertains to the academic side, which is what I would expect we would have to have a discussion and recommendation to the board. But there's also cadet life and barracks, right? Where they live, what are going to be their requirements if they fulfill the requirements for graduation, but they stay for a 9th semester or a 5th year. What are going to be those requirements? So those are the things that we're going to work through to present here in the May time. I just wanted to make sure you all were aware of kind of what this whole fifth quarter thing is about. Again, Jamal's going to talk about a lot of this in this community, but I wanted to see if there was any thoughts and input from the EXCOM on any configuration.
I'll go to that latest meeting tomorrow. For sure.
Okay. All right.
Can I ask a question on a separate topic? Which is, have you put together, I don't know who you might be working with and how you're monitoring and reviewing the executive orders coming out of the new administration as to what may apply to anything that the Institute is doing. Obviously, most institutions are taking a hard look, and I'm just curious of what your approach has been to that.
So far, PAC has begun to look into them, but in conversations with the Secretary of Education, she and I just talked last night, the Secretary of Education has indicated that we're going to talk to the boards, or at least some people on the boards, about pausing, right? Because this is federal direction in the form of those executive orders that will affect states, and pausing until until the Attorney General's office has had time to review and interpret what those executive orders mean, so that then they can communicate guidance to state agencies. So, Pat, I think you've been doing a little bit of looking at some, but I have told Paul as well.
Yes, sir. I told Paul, if there are any specific questions, I can take those and then do some research. and
Okay,
get
but
back
so
to the
somebody,
agency.
so it's just being done at another level.
At state,
it's
at
being-
state level,
Okay,
Attorney General.
and then I just related to at least one facet of what has gone on, and obviously there was a pause on this as well, but is there a comprehensive list somewhere, do we have access as a board to all of the facets or avenues of federal funding that VMI receives, federal grant dollars that may be coming into specific departments or to particular professors? Like, I would assume and understand, obviously, we have the ROTC programs, we obviously, individuals are receiving federal loan dollars or federal grant money, but what about other grants that the institute receives or applies for?
I think we can gather that information. I think that it would in most cases entail federal monies. But I think we can gather that information. I'm thinking that most of it would fall under Shannon in financial aid, but we do have some grants. We do have a federal grant for cybersecurity that we split with the other senior military college. I'm sure there are a couple of others.
Yeah, I
So
think-
let us put that together.
Thank you, I think that would be, just as, because there will be things that each institution needs to kind of inventory, even as the state is thinking through the approaches.
Mhm.
And then I had one other different topic or question, which was just whether any work has been done to assess needs for a potential capital campaign, and sort of whether there's already thinking underway on that, whether there's already a committee or a task force, or sort of what you're looking at on that.
Yeah, so I'll tell you what we've done, and then I'll ask David to just chime in about the work that they've been doing. I think they briefed some of it during the AAB here the other day. So, what we did was, we have come up with, number one, early on, working with the alumni agencies. We came up with kind of a wish list, if you will, of a number of different projects, mostly built around capital, that we saw a need for the institute to pursue, some of which we have already moved out on and is represented by the $270+ million worth of capital funding that we've already received. The other part is that as we are working the strategic plan, right, because strategic plan kind of big hand movements, talks about some of this stuff. Mike McCarthy has begun to work more of the details of the tasks and associate them with specific initiatives, and to begin to flesh out rough order of magnitude costs, right? So he has gone through capital projects plan, and he's annotated and refined the numbers, working with Dallas's team of all the projects that are in there. There's other work that we're gonna have to do, for example, when we start talking about the ideas that are gonna manifest themselves in 21st century classrooms. We're gonna have to come up with some work on that to flush out those. But for the big capital projects, we already have a good idea of what those things are, and we're beginning to associate them with time and space as well. So over a time continuum, what we would do. And we're going to work with the agencies to give them that number kind of as our wish list number, but they have the experience in how to frame this around the capital campaign. And I'll let David talk about how they would undertake what we come up with as kind of the wish list, as it is.
Thank you. Yeah, we met yesterday. We are looking at a comprehensive capital campaign. We're looking at timelines, looking at feasibility. We've already looked at consultants. And we get those final numbers again. As any school, they're going to have $700 million of ask.
closed
Any other-
session?
Yeah, we can move to closed session.
I have a couple other
Okay.
issues just to raise. John, one is meeting frequency. We're burning the clock up today already. I'd like to see the executive committee get in the habit of meeting more frequently. I think we've got more work to do. And we don't allocate enough time to do it. Couple issues that I'd like to just air or tee up, I guess. One is FOIA and FOIA fees. I've seen some pretty hefty fees that VMI has requested or charged for FOIA requests. And I know that VMI spends a lot of time fulfilling the request. We're allowed to charge for reasonable costs associated with it. But if we're charging really high fees, does that send the right message around transparency that we want to send? So I want to tee it up, not for discussion, but I think it'd be worthwhile to kind of gauge, maybe benchmark us against some other schools and just learn what other schools are doing. Should we cap them? Should we, adjust them in any way? In the spirit of trying to be more transparent. So I don't want us to spend a lot of time on that today, but I want to tee it up as something worth just, we're not the only one that is hit with a lot of FOIAs. How do other schools do it?
Yeah, I know from my practice, other schools in Virginia certainly get them, and certainly charge more, allocate costs. So, why don't we just take it as a marching order for the next meeting to have somebody give us do we have a policy on how we charge?
We do.
Okay, like maybe let's get that, let's share it, let's look at what others do.
Okay.
Seems good.
The other one is everybody's favorite, the cadet. And, we raised the issue for quite a while around having a permit for the cadet, for the newspaper. And we now have one that was sent to, we saw it. The signed permit. It's my understanding that it's still not a workable permit or a permit that is being utilized by the cadets, and there's several reasons for that. And I'm wondering if there's someone I can talk to, just to point out some of these concerns.
Can you share with me?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. That'd be
Again, I don't want a debate or a discussion now, but I'm happy to talk with you about it.
Sure.
I can piggyback off of the first point that you made, which was the executive committee meetings, and I second that. I think we need more of that. And I mentioned this, but I just want to get this out, and I'd love to get Tom's thoughts on it. So I think I mentioned it to each of you separately. The audit committee has so much responsibility and volume that I feel like we're consistently not getting as deep as we need to on some things. And so I don't know structurally what the answer is. One idea I had, and I didn't even think about whether the bylaws permitted, is a subcommittee perhaps that focuses on safety, emergency responsiveness, cybersecurity, that component, which is incredibly important cuts across numerous different areas, everything from facilities, obviously, to, Clery Act, et cetera. And whether it's a subcommittee, I don't know that it needs to be a separate committee, and I again, haven't thought that through, but, it's just, I feel like each time we have a lot to discuss on budget, and we just don't give out the attention it needs. And I mean, first and foremost, more than anything else, we need to keep everyone on this coast safe. And, it's just very much weighing on my mind.
Well, you guys said you wanted Tom's thoughts. Can I go first?
Yeah, go ahead, absolutely.
Yeah, I will say this, and I've talked to you about it, Kate, I haven't talked to anybody else about it, I haven't talked to Kate about it. Last year, I just went through the boards of all the Virginia colleges and kind of looked at them. And pretty much every other Virginia college has 3 major committees that's our AFP committee put together. And so to your point, Kate, I do think we ought to take a look at the structure. I don't know what y'all's thoughts are, but that committee does so much. If you look at other colleges, and I'm doing it from memory, most colleges have some sort of finance and budget, some sort of buildings and grounds. Excuse me, safety there, isn't it? Right, that's a whole separate committee, right? And I do wonder if we don't have way too much going on in that committee. But I
couldn't say it better. I mean, items 7, 8, and 10 on the agenda, today's agenda, has to do with risk management, basically. And as you know, you can have a whole committee that does nothing but risk management. And then they dealt with the issues, Kate, you were talking about, safety, security, those kinds of things. We also have some committees others don't have too. So I think if you're going to look at this, it's probably worth kind of, once again.
Yeah, no, I agree. We're unique and we have some unique things.
Yeah, no, and decide and keep testing that uniqueness. Is it that unique, or should we try to move into a more consistent template of other things? But there's 3 or 4 items that you'd agree on here. They're great to have under your oversight, but they all involve risk. Personnel risk, property risk, or it's a risk function.
Yeah. We ought to take a part of that for next year, I think. Yeah.
Maybe if we're moving on to a different quick topic, I mentioned it to you, I mentioned it to the Nominations and Governance Committee. I think a refresher on board responsibility and communication would be helpful, because we've had some articles that come out where I think people are directly responding to a media request without having gone through the proper protocols here, and there's some consequences to that. So I just ask that we at some point as a board have a refresher on the policies and procedures associated with board communication. Trying to pull some of this stuff back is very difficult. And I can get specific on the specific pieces I'm referencing separately.
Okay, sure. All right. Closed session. All right.
You're on.
You're gonna make me real long, aren't you?
Welcome.
All right.
Y'all pay attention here everywhere, John, don't worry.
All right, at this time, 5:30 p.m. I entertain a motion that the executive committee go into closed meeting to discuss matters relating to the employment, assignment, appointment, or performance of specific public officers, appointees, or employees of the public body, and evaluation of the performance of departments or schools and public institutions of higher education pursuant to Virginia Code 2.2-3711, A1, relating to the evaluation of the superintendent's performance and or discussion of individual personnel matters. 2, disciplinary and other matters that would involve disclosure of information contained in the scholastic records of specific cadets pursuant to Virginia Code 2.23711, A2, relating to discipline, sexual assault, and honor court cases. 3, discussion or consideration by governing boards of public institutions of higher education of matters relating to gifts, bequests, and fundraising activities, and of grants and contracts for services or work to be performed by such institution pursuant to Virginia Code 2.23711, A9. Consultation with legal counsel regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.23711, A7, pertaining to actual or probable litigation of the institute. 5, consultation with legal counsel regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.23711, A8. Do I have a motion?
You have a motion.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? None. We are in closed session.